Hey, Steve here, and in this video I'm showing you 4 examples of how to use the Orton effect to add a soft, colourful glow to your landscape photos. Now this video follows on from my previous video, the ultimate guide to the Orton effect in Photoshop, which shows in detail how to create the effect and modify it in the ways that I'm about to show you here. So in this video I'll be running through some examples a bit quicker without explaining every single step in detail. Now, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know so I can keep on making more like this. And remember to subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified by YouTube every time I publish a new video. So with that said, let's get started. Now, I'll be using the Orton Effect button in my luminosity masking panel as a shortcut to creating the Orton Effect layer. If you'd like to download the panel, you can get it at luminositymaskingpanel.com, or you can follow the steps in my ultimate guide video to create the effect manually. But to make things quicker here, like I said a second ago, I'll just be hitting the Orton button to create the effect, and then I'll carry on modifying it in similar ways to what I suggested in my ultimate guide video. Now this example that's on the screen at the moment is a nice kind of almost daytime coloured sort of shot, so there's not all the glowing sunrise colours in the sky. But we do have a nice morning light across the landscape anyway. And yeah, the image at the moment is kind of semi-processed. It still lacks a little bit of contrast and a bit of vibrance. So what we'll do is use the Orton effect to add that now. So as I said, I'll just hit that Orton button on my luminosity masking panel, and that's going to create the Orton effect layer for me. And when it does that, it gives it a black layer mask, so that's hiding the effect from view. So to see what it looks like in its full glory, let's just invert the mask, so Command or Control I. And as we can see there, as I suggested in my previous video, the shadows have gone a wee bit dark, but the highlights and midtones has actually given a really nice glow to that light. So what I'll do is I'll probably just invert the mask here again, and I'll just take a white brush and I'll just use the method that I showed in my ultimate guide video to just paint this effect into those areas where it looks good. In the layer mask, and so we're just revealing this effect through the middle of the shot there, and maybe just on a 30% opacity on the brush I can afford to give it a little bit down in the bottom corner here. I don't want it to go too dark and underexpose, but I think that looks like a nice amount. So even with that one quick layer that we just added with some real basic brush strokes in the layer mask, it's added that nice soft glow, and we've got that real nice effect coming through. I'll just see what we can do to actually, if we can push it a little bit further and really make this light on these trees up here really shine. So this time I think I'll add a luminosity mask to the Orton effect layer. Now rather than create the luminosity mask in the channels panel, I'll actually use my luminosity masking panel to create a selection that isolates those highlights. Now again, if you want to download the panel, you can go to luminositymaskingpanel.com or click the link in the description. Otherwise, the basics of how to do this is also covered in my previous guide to the Orton effect video. Or if you want to start learning luminosity masking from the ground up, you can download my free PDF guide, An Intro to Luminosity Masking. That's in the description also. But for now, I'll just run through the steps using the panel to make this as quick as possible. So I've got my previews turned on, and I'm going to hit the button here to load a selection that isolates the highlights. Now that's kind of okay, but the highlights here aren't quite as isolated from the shadows as I want, so I'm just going to click the levels button here to modify this selection here with the levels adjustment. So I can move this control point up this way to brighten the highlights, and I can darken the midtones here so that we've got more contrast between the bright and dark areas in the trees up here. So that looks okay. I'll click OK to that, and now I'll click Use Mask. From here I can click the Orton layer or the Orton button, and it's going to load that selection as the luminosity mask of the Orton effect layer. So we're adding a second Orton effect here now, and as we can see, that has added that effect there. And because of the luminosity mask, it's avoided all of those dark areas, but it's kind of enhanced and really made those colors in the highlights there really vibrant. Now I actually want to see if I can push this a little bit further even still, and so I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer, and then just like in the ultimate guide video to this method, I will I'll hold on the keyboard Alt or Option, hold the mouse between the curves adjustment and the Orton layer, and I'll just click that to clip the curve to the Orton layer. And now I'm just going to brighten it and see if we can really make that light pop through the middle there. So you can see there that glow is getting even brighter without overexposing. Still need to be careful of that. And there we go. I think the image is looking pretty good now. So let's just compare that with these two Orton layers turned off. So here again, pretty flat contrast through the image, and then with these two layers added, the shadows have got some nice deep colors to them, but they haven't been underexposed, and the highlights are looking really good and vibrant and colorful. So with that, let's take a look at the next example. And this time we have got a typical sunset image with those sort of nice warm colors in the sky. I'll probably just start off again like in the last example, just adding the Orton layer just to see what it does. And I'll invert just to kind of get a measure of how strong the effect is going to be here. So yeah, that looks really good in the sky, not so much in the foreground. It looks a bit too blurred there, and that's just too much of a soft hazy effect. So we could either reduce the opacity to blend it in a bit, or what I'll do actually is just delete this layer and then recreate it again with a highlight selection active. So you can do this in the channels panel, or I'll just use my luminosity panel here. So I'll load a selection for the highlights, and again I think I'll just modify it with the levels adjustment here to sort of brighten that sky up a little bit more. So more of the Orton effect is going to be used in the sky, the whiter I can make this selection. And with that done, I'll just click use mask and then click the Orton button. And there we go, that is what that looks like. So we've got the Orton layer with that luminosity mask in the with that luminosity selection loaded into the layer mask. The jetty here, I don't like how that's getting quite so much of that glowing effect. So I'll just take a brush here, a black brush, about 50%, and I'll just mask it out of the foreground here, just sort of being rough with the brush strokes. I don't need to be too super accurate. And let's see what that looks like. So it's pretty subtle, but it's just giving it that nice amount of extra contrast and color, and it's got a bit of that nice hazy glow in the distance as well. So for this example, I think that's probably all I would want to give it. Now, with that said, let's take a look at example number 3. And here again, it's a nice sunrise image, but we've got some different colors in the sky compared to the last one. But yeah, the image is just lacking a bit of contrast. So in this example, this image is, I've processed it most of the way, so probably about 80% of the way there, most of the way through the workflow. So, at this point, I would give the Orton effect a shot and see what it does. So again, let's just click the Orton button and invert the mask to see how that looks. Now that's pretty strong. I don't really like what it's doing through the mountains there. That's just way too dark and glowy. Just looks a bit, just looks wrong to me. So what I'll do, I do like what it's doing in the sky here. So I'll just invert that mask back to black, and with a white brush, I'll just brush this manually into the sky here, just to really sort of enhance those clouds, because I do like how that looks, and probably just in the foreground here a bit as well, just so it matches. So let's look at the before and after on that. So that's a nice enhancement to the sky. And I think we might be able to do something nice with this line of bushes that's kind of hugging the edge of the lagoon here. So yeah, let's do that with another Orton Effect layer. This time, let's think about this. Okay, so I need to load a selection because I want to isolate these bushes as I'm sort of brushing the effect in. Okay, actually, let's create it without the layer mask or the luminosity mask. So let's click that Orton layer. Orton button again, I keep saying Orton layer. And then invert the mask. And now in this view, I'm going to add that curves adjustment and then clip it to the Orton layer. And now from here, I'm just going to visually judge, I'm going to push the brightness up on this curve, and just by eye, I'm going to push it to a point where the where these bushes look nice and bright, and just looks like a nice amount of sort of light that I would want to brush in. So let's compare that. Okay, that's still too glowy, but I'll be able to just brush this in manually so that it won't take on that overall glow around the whole image. Okay, so with that done, let's go back to the Orton Effect layer, click on the layer mask and invert the mask again. So that just brings it back to this pre-Orton view. And now I can either try and brush accurately with a brush through the middle here. So if I was going to do that, let's just put it on 100% opacity. I could just take this white brush into the layer mask of the Orton Effect, and as I brush through the middle there, those bushes are kind of taking on that bright glow. But if I wanted to be a bit more accurate, I could create a luminosity mask to make sure that I'm only brushing into the brightest parts. I won't run through that now, and this is probably getting a little bit longer already than I wanted this video to be. But yeah, that's how you can sort of just isolate an individual part of the shot to apply the Orton effect, and it almost is as if you've kind of got an Orton brush. When you do it this way, and you can just brush the effect in where you want it. Now I probably will just pull the opacity back on the Orton Effect layer here. That's just a little bit overcooked, I think. But this, around about 50 to 60% I think is going to be good on the opacity. And let's just do a quick before and after on all of this. So this is before. And now with the two Orton layers, the one that affects the sky and the water, and then the one that affects those bushes around the edge of the lagoon. There we go. That's a nice kind of, I would be happy that this is a finished product now. So with that said and done, let's move on to the fourth and final example. So here we go back to a daytime shot. Again, some really still water. We got really lucky with the conditions on this day. But as you can see, a really low contrast image, and it's one that I think is going to respond really well to the Orton effect. So let's just start off again by clicking the Orton button to create the effect. I'll invert the mask to just see what it looks like, and to be honest, that's actually pretty good just as it is. The shadows here are probably getting a bit too much of that glowing effect, so I might just brush that out. And again, you could try and do that accurately, but I think this is definitely a time where you'd want to create a luminosity mask. So I'll just use the panel to quickly do that. So I'm going to create a selection that isolates these sort of broken stumps from the surrounding water. So let me just try some of these different options here. That's probably pretty good. Maybe here, actually, 5 on the shadows end of this scale is probably going to give us the best shot. I might just tweak it a little bit with the levels adjustment. And if you're watching this and you're not sure, you're not familiar with the panel, you're not sure what I'm doing, then if you just go to luminositymaskingpanel.com, then you'll see a full demo of how to use the panel and how to create luminosity masks using the panel. Otherwise, if you're familiar with luminosity masking the manual way, then you should hopefully sort of be able to follow along and do this the manual way in the channels panel yourself. But the panel does make it a lot easier and quicker to do all this kind of stuff, so that's why I'm just using it in this video here. So that's a pretty good isolation between those stumps and the water around it, so I'll just click OK. I'll click Use Mask, and now that loads the preview into a new selection. And with a black brush now, if I hide the marching ants, Command or Control H, just reduce the brush opacity, and I can just brush this Orton effect out of these stumps just to get rid of that glowing effect, because it does look a bit weird up close like this. And let's see what that looks like, the before and after on that. So it's still got some of that effect in those stumps, but overall I actually really like the effect of this, and we just had to mask it out of this little bit in the foreground to stop that being overly blurry and glowy. I'll pop some links on the screen to some other videos that you might find useful here on my channel. But for now, thanks for watching. I hope you found these examples useful, and that they gave you some good tips on the kinds of images and the kind of effect that you can give to your images using the Orton effect.